Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Grantarachima Bhaktam ki jai, Nitya Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Gaura. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, today we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 11, Calculation of Time from the Atom, text 18. Yeah. Maitreya Vacha Kritam Tretadva Paramcha Kritam Tretadva Paramcha Kalishcheti Chaturyugam Kalishcheti Chaturyugam Tivyardvada Shabirvarshai Tivyardvada Shabirvarshai Savadanam Nirupitam Savadanam Nirupitam Maitreya Vacha Kritam Tritadva Paramcha Kalishcheti Chaturyugam Tivyardvada Shabirvarshai Savadanam Nirupitam Maitreya Vacha Kritam Tritadva Paramcha Kalishcheti Chaturyugam Tivyardvada Shabirvarshai Savadanam Nirupitam Maitreya Vacha Kritam Tretadva Paramcha Kalishcheti Chaturyugam Tivyardvada Shabirvarshai Savadanam Nirupitam Maitreya Vacha Kritam Tretadva Paramcha Kalishcheti Chaturyugam Tivyardvada Shabirvarshai Savadanam Nirupitam Maitreya Vacha Kritam Tretadva Paramcha Kalishcheti Chaturyugam Tivyardvada Shabirvarshai Savadanam Nirupitam. Word to word, Maitreya Vacha. Maitreya said, Kritam, the age of Satya, Treta, the age of Treta, Dvaparam, the age of Dvapara, Cha, also, Kalihi, the age of Kali, Cha, and Iti, thus, Chatu Yugam, 4 millenniums, Divyahi, of the demigods, Dvadashibihi 12 Varshehi thousands of years. Sa avadanam approximately. Nirupitam ascertained. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhayacharinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Maitreya said, O Vidura, the 4 millenniums are called the Satya, Treta, Dwapara and Kali Yugas. The aggregate number of years of all of these combined is equal to 12,000 years of the demigods. Purport. The years of the demigods are equal to 360 years of humankind. As will be clarified in the subsequent verses, 12,000 of the demigods' years, including the transitional periods which are called Yuga Sandhyas, comprise the total of the aforementioned 4 millenniums. Thus the aggregate of the above-mentioned 4 millenniums is 4,320,000 years. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadate Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshcha Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sachivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandha Jagatpate Gopyesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshvari Rishabhana Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpadarabhashta Kripa Sindhyabha Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhya Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming for Srimad Bhagavatam class or listening online. So we're continuing in chapter 11 of the third canto, calculation of time from the atom. It's a short part, but I might read more. I'll see how we go with the time in the text 18 that we read today. So, as mentioned yesterday, so we heard so far in this chapter how, quite in detail, Maitreya Rishi was explaining how even here in Bhagavatam we see how time can be calculated right from the atom, which generally we think that only as like atheists think about atoms. Trying to explain the origin and the constitution of the universe without Krishna, without a supreme eternal source and controller of everything and enjoyer. But we see here, even in the Vedic system, that the atom is there, is explained, and it's explained here how it's space and time are correlated, that you can, from the atom, that you can calculate time. And we heard how when 6 atoms are together, that it's called a hexaton or trasorenu, and that's what can be seen when the sun shines on it, as everything in the material world needs illumination by the sun, obviously. So that's the smallest unit that can be perceived, and from that is the lowest unit of time calculated, called a Shruti, and then it goes gradually, different units are calculated. And we came then all the way to up the span of a human life, which is supposedly 100 of our years, solar years. And then Vidura was asking Maitreya Rishi to please explain more also in larger scale, namely what we heard here today onwards, the reply of Maitreya Rishi in terms also of the demigods and other living beings who live above our universe. Again, there also we see the correlation between space and time. That here in our Bhumandala, especially here in Bharatvarsha at least, actually even in other parts I think they have longer lifespan than the other Varshas of Bhumandala, or other Varshas of Jambudvip and other islands of Bhumandala. So, but yeah, for us it's supposed to be 100 years, and then as you go up, the time expands of how long living beings are living there in Bhuvaloka and then Svargaloka and so forth. And so in today's text, Maitri Rishi is replying that he's before saying just immediately a number of years of how long the demigods, for example, in Svargaloka are living, he's explaining it for us a bit to make it more relatable, and also showing how it's still systematic. He's explaining it in terms of the 4 yugas that we know. Kali Yuga, in the one we are living in right now, we are now at altogether Kali Yuga has 432,000 years, of which only 5,000 years have passed so far right now, and so that's the shortest yuga. Double of that is then 864,000 years, how long Dwapara Yuga lasts, and if you add another 432,000 years, that's I think 1,296,000 years. That's then the duration for Treta Yuga, and before that then Satyuga is the first yuga, or which is also called Krita Yuga, I think, as we heard recited today. Krite Samanavartate, yes. And so that's then another 432,000 years, so that's 1,800,000 and... Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but yeah, that region. So if you add those 4 together, then you come to 4,320,000 years, right? That's what Prabhupada explained in the purport today. Yes. And those 4 of our years, 4,320,000 years, that is equivalent to only 12,000 years of the demigods. And we heard that before, so the conversion is that 1 of our year makes up only 1 day there, right? Because 6 months is 12 hours for them, and our whole year is for them 24 hours, including the night. Yes. So in Svargaloka, and then, but even up there's different levels. In like the Pita Lokas are a bit lower. We heard I think that also recently, how for them the conversion is something like one instead of 6 months, only 1 month, something like that. So it's in between, and then as you go further up, so mentioned, then he was particularly asking also about the planets, I think, of those greatly learned living entities who are beyond the range of a kalpa. So that refers particularly then to even above Svargaloka, above which in all the planets, including Svargaloka, said they are below Dhruvaloka, the pole star, as per the desire of the Lord to glorify his devotee, Maharaj Dhruva, who is residing there with Krita Kashaya Vishnu. And so, but all of that gets destroyed every night of Brahma. And so Vidura is asking here about the planets even above that, which is Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka, which is Lord Brahma's planet. So as you go up further and further, the time expands, which means the duration of the lifetimes of those elevated living beings. And so yes. Yeah, that's from today's text. And I want to talk a bit more about time in general. How we, like yesterday, I mentioned about which in a few texts ago we heard how the sun is giving her mercy, or I think the sun here said his mercy, because I guess the presiding deity is Vivasvan, the sun god. So that he gives us his mercy by, first of all, of course, bringing illumination and heat to the whole universe. But again, actually, whole universe means still not the whole universe. I remember it's mentioned, I think, like all the lower planetary systems below Bhumandala, they don't get sunshine actually, because they are. Ganesh Prabhu was explaining that last year when he gave several classes on Vedic cosmology, how actually, it's Bhumandala is right in the middle of the universe, and so the universe is explained like kind of like egg shape or round. So that's also the widest part of the universe. It's about, like we here there's those 7 dvipas, and they are, each one is double the size of the innermost one. So we are on the innermost one, Jambudvip, and that itself has 9 varshas. And even within the varshas, in our case Bharatvarshas, there's again khandas and other more divisions, and then within that, then our planet Earth is. So even Jambudvip is huge. Like there's said, like the Himalayas, for example, the original Himalayas outside of our planet, but dividing the whole Bharatvarsha from Kimpurusha Varsha, all of this mountain and all the other those mountains which divide the different varshas, they are 10,000 yojanas high, which is like roughly 128,000 kilometers. So, and then so there's many of those mountains, like there's Himalayas, then there's Himakut mountain, and then Nishada mountain. That's the next 3 for us, which the Nishada divides Ilavrita Varsha, the innermost, like explained yesterday, where Sumeru mountain is, from Harivarsha, where Prahlad Maharaj is worshipping Nrsimhadev, and then Himakut mountain divides Harivarsha from Kimpurusha Varsha, where Hanuman is worshipping Lord Ramachandra, and then, like Ganesh Prabhu recently told a pastime about which happened there at the Himalayas, then between Hanuman and Bhimasen. So, because other living entities, they cannot cross any of these varshas even, which are all within Jambudvip. Only extraordinary living entities like Bhimasen and the Pandavas, they were empowered by the Lord to do so, and Hanuman, obviously. But so, for others, even that is, you can't cross. And so that's already so huge, just Jambudvip, and which is the smallest of the 7 islands, and then goes all the way out to across the other islands just for Bhumandala. So Bhumandala is the widest planetary system, and so everything below that is actually in the crust of Earth crust of Bhumandala. That's why they are called subterranean planets. So, and consequently, the sunlight cannot reach there because it's just in the Earth crust. So everywhere there, it's Earth crust means not like we imagine here. Otherwise, there couldn't be life. I guess it must be kind of a more subtle manifestation. But sunlight doesn't go there. The sun is traveling, said, around the Manasotra mountains, around the Dvipas in Jambudvip, and balancing in the middle on Sumeru mountain. And so the sunlight reaches everywhere there and up as well to the higher planetary systems. So, about the sun, so that's one kind of mercy, how the sun illuminates the all the planetary systems above Bhumandala, including Bhumandala, and thus giving life to everything. But the other mercy mentioned here was that he is also helping us to overcome the illusion of thinking the material world to be the place for enjoyment. I mentioned this famous verse about Ayuharati Vaipumsam, that Udyanastam Chayanasa, with both by rising and by setting the sun, diminishes the duration of our lifetime, our Ayu. And except for those, Tasyate Yatcharanita Uttamashloka Vartaya, except for those who are engaged in glorifying the Lord, or hearing about the glories, that's included as all of us are trying to do now, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, Sri Radha Gopinath. So, and about, in the last few months I've been reading Bhagavad Gita, I finished last week now, and there it's mentioned in 17th chapter, I think. Like there's, in the last several chapters, there's quite a lot actually about the three modes, all the different aspects of it, how to see them in different spheres of our life. So one of them is in chapter 17 is called the Visions of Faith, where Arjuna is asking about, initially about the faith, because in 16th chapter Krishna made it very clear how the main distinction between demonic and nature and divine nature is that the divine nature means you simply abide by the order of the Lord, by the rules and regulations as set forth by Him, whereas demonic nature means not to do that. Demons, they are envious not only of the form of the Lord, but also of His scriptures, of Shastra. And so they want to go against that. It's like one of the famous verses there, Yashastra vidimutsrichya vartatit kamakarataha nasasitim avapnati nasukam na param gatim. That whoever gives up following the instructions of the Shastras, the injunctions, he cannot, and rather acts whimsically, according to what his mind says, then he cannot attain perfection, he cannot attain happiness, and obviously not the supreme destination. So, having heard all of that, then Arjuna at the beginning of 17th chapter is asking about, so what about those who also apparently faithfully worship someone, something, but not according to Shastra? And so that's how then 17th chapter starts off, how Krishna explains how that is all depending on the modes, of the worship. Like some worship ghosts, that's in Tamagun, some worship demigods, and that's, generally demigod worship is more in mode of passion because you want to do it for some material desire, but there in that context, Krishna is mentioning it as in goodness, compared to the other things that he mentions, like worshipping great personalities on this planet, or what to speak of worshipping ghosts. Like that. So anyway, I wanted to come to, so one of the aspects Krishna is explaining there is food stuff also in the modes. And there actually, because I think it's quite previously, when you read something like this, you think, well, it's not so relevant, it's okay, it's interesting to hear, but for devotees, we take prasad, so it's transcendental, not in the modes. But it's actually, can also appreciate the mercy of prasad and even more that it's amazing. Even food stuff, mode in goodness, how superior that is compared, and like how much effect, how powerful compared to rajasic food, or what to speak of tamasic. So there Krishna says that in mode of goodness, so some of the qualities of that is saying, Ayu sattva palarogya sukha priti vivardhana rasya snikta stiraridya ahara sattvika priya. That foodstuff mode in goodness, what does it do? And the first thing he mentions there, that's why I'm saying it is Ayu, that it actually increases your lifespan. And I was thinking of that a bit, that we know, like I think Kamsari Sinapu recently mentioned about how actually the lifespan and those kind of things, that's all predetermined by our karma. But then again, it's more in terms of, you can't increase it, that's for sure, but still you have the free will to actually decrease it. So my understanding from that there was then with the food here, in goodness, increasing your lifespan means if you live like that, then in goodness, then you maximize the potential lifespan that you have, whatever is destined for you. But whereas if you eat other things, then by doing that karma in this life as well, then we even reduce it more. So that's the first quality, that it increases the lifespan. Ayu sattva, in mode of goodness means it purifies your existence compared to the other modes. Bala means it gives us bodily strength. Arogya, it increases our health, and sukha and priti means that kind of food stuff actually gives you happiness and satisfaction. And it's rasya snikta, it's juicy, it's fatty. Stira means it's wholesome, so it endures. And ridya, and it's pleasing to the heart. So such glorious qualities is simply for a mode of goodness. So what to speak of transcendental prasadam that we get by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. And yeah, whereas in even Rajasic food is like quite different. Krishna mentions that as being Katumla Lavana Tyushna Tikshna Ruksha Vidahinaha Ahara Rajasasyashta Dukkashoka Maya Pradaha. So food in mode of passion is Katu, is bitter, amla, sour, lavana, salty, and all of that means too much of that, obviously, because a little bit of that is in many foodstuffs and required. So salty, atyushna, too hot. Tikshna means pungent, very pungent. Ruksha means dry, and vidahinaha means burning. And so what's the effect of eating like that? It dukkha shoka maya means it gives you distress and misery, and amaya and disease. Whereas in food and goodness, if you eat, then arogya, then you get health, and in even rajasic food you get disease. So what to speak of then tamasic food, obviously. And yeah, even though prasadam is transcendental, of course, working on our material body, it's still also good to try to follow these directions as well, not to make it too much of all of that's mentioned here for rajasic food, for example. And then, yeah, tamasic, that's quite funny actually, I find that verse. Anyway, yeah. So it's mentioned as yatayamam katarasam puta paryushitam chayat uchishtam apichametyam. What's mentioned there for the tamasic? Bochanam tamasa priya, something like that. Can't remember the exact word then for mentioning the food of ignorance itself. But so the qualities described by Krishna that yatayama means food cooked for more than 3 hours before, or eaten more than 3 hours after it was cooked. But Prabhupada explains then the purport, of course, again, prasadam, because it's transcendental, for that it doesn't become tamasic after 3 hours. But generally, foodstuff is always supposed to be eaten fresh. And yeah, and then gata rasam. So the rasa, the taste is gone in tamasic food. It's tasteless. And puti means it smells bad, putrid. And amedyam means it's decomposed. And uchishtam means to eat remnants from someone else other than a pure devotee or the Lord, obviously. And yeah, so that's mode of ignorance. Anyway, coming back to the point of this lifespan being dependent even on the food we eat still. And in terms of, so I mentioned that how time is mentioned also to be the external manifestation of the Lord's form of the Super Soul. And there, then in 18th chapter, especially the last part, 18th chapter obviously is like really beautiful, because after all it's the conclusion of the whole Bhagavad Gita. So there Krishna really pours it out then. And so he simultaneously summarizes also. So he gives, and towards then the later section, he then starts off with summarizing again how through Gyan, like the path of speculative knowledge, but mixed with bhakti, how you reach perfection through that. So that's confidential knowledge, and then more confidential knowledge about where he gives again knowledge of the Super Soul, and then most confidential simply in pure bhakti, surrendering to him. So after Krishna concludes the section of the through Gyan, when you reach perfection there, that eventually then when you switch or come to the point of pure bhakti, then from Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, then through that you become qualified, as Krishna says, through to pure bhakti, engagement in pure bhakti. Brahma Bhuta Prasannat Manashochadina Kankshti Sama Sarvesha Bhutasho Mat Bhaktim Labate Param. And and from there then he speaks then some verses in, how you should engage in such pure bhakti. And there are 3 verses I find particularly nice there in a series which are very practical instructions also for us, how we should engage in our devotional service. So Krishna says, Sarva karmani apisada kurvano madhyapashrayaha mat prasada tavapnoti shashvatam paramavyayam. Krishna says that sarva karmani, in all your activities, apisada kurvano madhyapashrayaha. So in whatever activities you are engaged, take madhyapashraya, take full shelter of me, or and which Prabhupada explains in the short purport there very nicely, how this means actually especially to simply act according to Lord's instructions. And the Lord's instructions, how do we get them? Through our spiritual master. So to always, how are we really sheltered under the lotus feet of Shri Shri Radha Gopinath? That is, if we always strictly follow the instructions, because as soon as we're not following means acting according to our mind, which is contaminated by the 3 modes of nature, so which means that immediately then we are under the influence of the Lord's external feature and cannot be under his shelter. So that's what Prabhupada explains as Madhya Pashraya means. And working like that, then we get the Lord's mercy, Mat Prasada Avapnoti Shashvatam Paramavyam, and eventually attain that abode which is Shashvatam, which is eternal, and Avyayam, imperishable. So, and then Krishna elaborates a bit more on how we can do like that. So next verse he's saying, Chetasa sarva karmani mai sanyasya matparaha buddhi yoga mupashritya machchito statatam bhava. So Chetasa sarva karmani, mai sanyasya matparaha means Krishna is saying, so in all your activities just depend upon me and always work under my protection, matparaha. And because my sannyasa means to give up, and chetasa means in your consciousness, in your mind, that you are not attached to, you don't think yourself the doer, rather you know yourself fully dependent on Krishna. So that's how chetasa sarvakani mai sannyasa matparaha. So we fully depend on me, work always under my protection. And engaged in such devotional service, Buddha Yoga Mupachitya Machchita Satatam Bhava. And engaged in such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So Machchita. And from that then he continues in the next verse, that what's the effect if you engage in devotional service like that? So there again Prabhupada explains very beautifully in the purport how we can always be conscious of Krishna. Very, like he mentions, the very simple way. Of course, to apply it for us with our impurities, again, might be not so easy to always do it. We need to be vigilant and try. But it's very simple that Srila Prabhupada is explaining that how to always think of Krishna. Prabhupada is saying, if in whatever devotional service or devotional activity we are doing, that we always remember that I'm doing this because the Lord is very mercifully giving me particularly this service, this devotional activity to do now. Because in doing anything spiritual, we cannot do it in the external energy, obviously. There's only 2, either we are in Maya or we are in Yoga Maya, under the internal energy of the Lord. And to be in Yoga Maya, we cannot be by our own strength, by our own endeavor. So it's only possible by the causeless mercy of the Lord. And how do we get that? By the mercy of the Lord's devotees, and who very kindly instruct us how to engage and what to do, what service to do. Like, for example, we might think that, I'm just doing whatever devotional service I like, so it's not really given by an authority to me. It's I want to please Gopinath like that, and so yes, he's merciful, lets me do that. But actually, no, it's whatever we are doing, we are actually doing it somehow or other, either directly being instructed by our spiritual master, or otherwise, we still, whatever we are doing here, we don't, it still somehow is connected through an authority. Like, for example, if you make garlands, then there is a leader in the garland team, a devotee who is giving us the service. We can't do whimsically, just making garlands at home and then bring it here, giving to the pujaris, so offer that garland and expect them to use it. No, it all comes somehow through authorities. And of course, that authority is answerable to other temple authorities, like we have the council, what's it called, the management, and they obviously are answerable to higher authorities than to GPC and so on, so forth. So it does all come through spiritual authorities. So, and all of them, we are all trying to simply serve Srila Prabhupada, and through the Guru Parampara, ultimately, Shri Radha Gopinath. So in that way, we can understand that whatever service we are doing, or if we're chanting or anything, attending morning program, it is specifically given by the Lord. It's not doesn't come random. Actually, we might sometimes think like that, but it's great mercy of the Lord. And it's mentioned, like you were talking about the super soul. As the super soul, Krishna is simply there as the Upadrashtanumantacha, as the overseer and permitter. He is simply neutral. But as for devotees, Krishna is there in the heart as himself in his personal form, where he takes personal care. Like Prabhupada mentioned, like for someone who doesn't care about the Lord, like Mayavadis for example, then for them the Lord also doesn't particularly care. Of course, he is merciful, he maintains everyone, and he is the super soul also. He is always eagerly awaiting anyone to turn his face to him again, like the analogy is given with those birds, two birds, but the one bird completely forgets about his friend, the other bird who is always witnessing him, and he is very busy trying to enjoy the fruits of the tree, trying to enjoy the material world. So he is always, for anyone, he is mercifully waiting and guiding us, giving us opportunities. But for the devotee, then he personally takes charge. Like it's mentioned here. I read just yesterday, actually, very beautifully there also in the 5th canto, where that's like I was reading, talking a bit more the last 2 days about the geography, because that's what I'm just reading, and also helps me to remember, and it's nice to visualize a bit actually. Because, one thing I was thinking is actually, sometimes you might think, well, it's too technical, or you might be lazy to try to understand a bit more about the cosmology. But actually, like, I think when every one of us, when you grow up in school, we learn so many of those countries and so much geography. But what is that geography? It's like, even in our lifetime, there's many countries who appear, disappear, who are renamed somehow, joining another country or being split, and so many changes, even in our lifetime. What to speak of? And we know, like from Shastra, that most countries which exist nowadays, they didn't exist then. So it's very temporary, very short-lived. And whereas that geography, that's at least for one day of Brahma. That's for, so you heard here, 4,320,000 years valid. So it's a bit more valid. And above that, then the higher planetary systems even surviving that. And also, it's not a random structure, this universe. That's like in the different scales. I'm pretty sure that all the universes would have the similar basic structure. And so after the whole universe is destroyed, then in the next breath of Mahavishnu also again it would be similar. I would assume at least. But anyway, so it is quite interesting actually to think about this cosmology as well. So what I was reading there like I mentioned yesterday with the word Samvatsara, because that Prajapati Samvatsara, that he is residing in Ketumala Vash, which is west of Ilavarta Vash, so it's in the center, but in the western part. And where there, the chief personality is Lakshmi Devi herself, and chief personnel in terms of worshipper, and the worshipper Lord there is Pradyumna or Kamadev. And so Prajapati Samvatsari, he has 36,000 daughters and sons. The daughters representing all the nights, every single night of a human lifetime, 400 years, and the sons representing the days. So, and all of them, they engage in worshipping Cupid there. And so Lakshmi Devi, she's saying the prayers, and the others praying along with her. During the day, the sons, and during the night, the daughters of Samvatsara. And so one of the so she starts after offering her obeisances unto the Lord, addressing him as Rishikesha, as the Lord of the senses. Then she, glorifying some other qualities. Then in the next verse she is pointing out how actually women who worship you in order to get a nice husband, they are very foolish, because they don't know that such a husband, he cannot actually really give you protection, he cannot really provide for you, because he's simply subject to his karma. And if the karma is good, okay, then you might be lucky for some time. If it's bad, then, well, you'll just suffer. So, even in the short lifetime, what to speak of eventually, everyone is meant to die in this material world. So, your real pati cannot be a material husband. But so worshipping the Supreme Lord for that purpose, is Lakshmi Devi is saying, is very foolish. And then Mother Lakshmi is pointing out that, rather elaborating a bit more, why that is foolish. And she is saying that that anyone who worships you simply in pure love, in pure devotional service, without any ulterior motive, so to such a person, now coming to the point how connected here, that to such a person the Lord provides fully. He personally takes charge of him. And whereas those who worship him for some temporary material benefit, the Lord will fulfill that desire also. But they might be happy for some time, but then eventually they will, even though worshipping the right person, if it's for a wrong purpose, still they will lament at the end, they will suffer, because whatever material they prayed for will be destroyed by the power of time, as we were discussing here. So, and Prabhupada there in the purport very beautifully he explains on this point of how the Lord takes personally care of us, and so therefore how foolish it is to hanker for material things and worship the Lord for material things. And he's quoting there obviously this famous verse from Bhagavad Gita 9:22, I believe. Where is it? Yeah. Ananyas chintayantam nitya yukta pasate tisham nitya viyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. Where Krishna says that one who ananyas, in undivided attention, is worshipping me all, and he's emphasizing there a few times, ananyas chintayantam nitya, always yukta upasate tisham nitya viyuktanam, again nitya. To such a person, I yogakshemam, I protect what they have, and vahamyaham, and I carry to them what they might lack. So, and knowing that, then, so I'll try to, actually Prabhupada there, he starts off the purport very beautifully, again coming also what we discussed previously with the rules and the regulations, that for us, obviously, we don't have that full faith and full devotion yet. But if we simply strictly follow the rules and regulations, perform devotional service in that way, and thus are under the Lord's personal protection, Madhya Pacharya, then gradually we become purified and come to the stage of spontaneous loving service. And at that stage, then we're actually able to worship the Lord without any motive, as Lakshmi Devi is mentioning here. And that, and Prabhupada is saying, and that is the perfect stage of one's relationship with the Lord. And so then he quotes 9:22 from Bhagavad Gita and says that the Lord personally takes care of anyone who is completely engaged in devotional service, And therefore, why should one bother the Lord for something material? Such prayers are unnecessary. So, yeah, very beautifully Prabhupada elaborates there also on what Lakshmi Devi is pointing out, how one should not worship the Lord for any material desire. And then she also further explains but then one might think, okay, Lakshmi, your very name indicates that you're the goddess of fortune, full wealth, so that's why many people think, okay, they worship the goddess of fortune to become wealthy, of what they think wealth being some material facilities, wealth. But actually, Mother Lakshmi then says further, actually, such people are foolish as well, because they don't understand that I don't bother to give material facilities to anyone. My only concern is to worship Lord Narayan, and so whoever worships him I'm blessing. I give all spiritual wealth, which might also be material wealth, but so, and then it's explained that Prabhupada explains then the purpose that, so how is it then that those who worship the goddess of fortune, when they get success in material life, then to such person she only is her expansion as Mother Durga Devi. She bestows opulence upon them. Okay, so coming back now to Bhagavad Gita in that section from Sarvakarmanya Pisada and then Chetasa Maya Sarvakarmani, that where Krishna says, working in that consciousness, always depending on me, and thus always being conscious of me, then in the next verse he says another result of that, and of not doing that. So he is explaining, Machita Sarva Durgani Mat Prasada Tarishyasi Atachetvam Ahankaram Nashosasi Vinakshasi. So that in that Machita, when you're always conscious of me and work under my protection, knowing yourself depend on me, then Sarva Durgani, whatever difficulties you might face, Mat Prasadat, having gotten my mercy, working in this way, Tarishyasi, you will cross over those difficulties. But then, what if you don't do it? Attachet tvam ahankaran nashosasi vinakshasi. If you don't do it, if you rather act out of false ego, not in your true ego as my eternal servant who knows yourself depend on me, not hearing me, nashosasi, then vinakshasi, then you will fall down from your transcendental position back into the material whirlpool. So, and yeah, actually, so that's. And after that, then Krishna switches to talking about the more confidential knowledge about the super soul, because he saw that after having explained that Arjuna playing the role perfectly of just posing himself as ignorant or as in a way that for giving us the maximum benefit, giving that Krishna gives us all this knowledge. So then, apparently, the acharyas mentioned that Krishna saw Arjuna still not being fully convinced of why he should work in this completely humble, dependent way on Krishna. So then Krishna, to give actually us more conviction, then he explains about his feature of the super soul, how we are fully dependent on him. That actually we are not the doer. You shouldn't think, oh, I have this great choice of working under Krishna or otherwise doing whatever I like. No, doing whatever you like means it's also done actually mostly through the super soul. We discussed that there's those 5 factors of action which Krishna a bit earlier explained in the 5th chapter. Adishtanam karta tata karta karanam cha pritakvitam vividas cha pritak cheshta daivam cha vatra panchamam. And so the 5th ultimate factor of this is the super soul. So we are fully dependent on him. That's why Krishna there then gives the famous verse Isvara Sarvabhutanam Ritasya Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantrarudani Mayaya. That Krishna tells him then that as the super soul, I'm the actual Ishvara situated in the heart, Ritasya, of all the living entities. And so what's the consequence of that? That all the living entities actually, they're simply moved by my will, Brahmayan Sarvabhutani, or by my facilitating them, misusing their free will in whatever body we are situated. And and they are simply yantarudani mayaya. They're simply situated in this body as on a machine, given by the material nature, by Maya. And so, knowing that, then Krishna stresses, the next verse is saying, knowing yourself so dependent, so surrender to me. What else would you still want to do? So he's saying, Tamiva sharanam gaccha sarvabhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim stanam prapsyasi shashvatam. That tam eva sharanam gaccha. So unto this person, unto this super soul, surrender. And how? Sarvabhavena bharata. He's saying, O son of Bharata, just surrender unto him utterly. And it's interesting, Krishna is speaking as in the third person, that the super soul unto him, even though it's him, but expansion, we know, plenary portion. So saying, surrender unto him utterly, and therefore by his mercy taprasadat param shantim, you will attain supreme peace and stanam prapsasi shashvatam, and again assuring, and the eternal supreme abode of mind. So and after that, then of course he goes to even more confidential knowledge with manmanama bhava matbhakto, and then sarvadhamam parityaja, and then gives Prabhupada, Ganesh Mabu yesterday again mentioned about now for our Gita marathon, and then where Krishna gives the conclusion further about how you can please him the most, or who is most dear to him. That person who gives that very knowledge, whom he just spoke there in the whole Bhagavad Gita, shares that with others. So yaidam paramam kritva, those two verses then. So that's then the most confidential knowledge. And out of time now. So thank you for your attention. If there's any questions or comments, please let us. Kanantara Chima Bhaktam Ki Cha, Shri Prabhupada Ki Cha.